Hello everyone, this is part 28 of What If Naruto was trained by the Kyuubi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. 3 years later. It's been 3 years since the Oto out offsand invasion of Konoha occurred, and many things have happened and changed since then within the elemental countries as a whole as well as separately for each country. Separately, most of the countries stayed as they had been, however several events rocked both Konoha, and Suna especially. For Konoha they were the retirement of the Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi and the inauguration of the Godaime Tsunade several weeks after the invasion when the village was back on its feet. To the shock of the village and the worry of the council, Sarutobi had decided upon his retirement he would settle down in Snow Country. When asked why there, he simply stated with a knowing smile that made some people question if he was lying after he spoke, "I've always wished to visit the country after Kakashi's mission to save Kyuubi Hime. And I'm sure I'll be very warmly welcomed there." And despite the council's worry about him being captured while traveling to obtain the secrets of the village, he dismissed them with a wave of his hand before he left the village the next day. The last and most talked about event of the village with equal importance to the Sandaime leaving was the defection of the last loyal Uchiha one Uchiha Sasuke. Several months after the invasion under the shadows of night, Sasuke left the village and joined forces with Orochimaru, and by the time the village figured it out he was already within Oto's borders. The village was devastated, they lost the last Uchiha, as well as one of the most powerful bloodlines known to exist. And with the loss of the Namikaze bloodline only months before, this new predicament left a very nasty taste in their mouths. Speaking of Namikaze, it seemed that months after he entered Suna, Naruto and his merry band completely dropped off the radar for both Konoha, as well as several other countries who wished to either keep tabs on their whereabouts, wanted to capture him, or want him. Either way, no one had heard hide nor hair of Naruto or his group for well over 2.5 years. Actually, that wasn't completely true, because during one of several events within Suna, included in them was Sabaku no Gaara being announced as the new Kazekage, since he was not only the strongest shinobi in the village at the time but also since he was the son of the previous Kage. Nearly a year later, strange men wearing black cloaks with red clouds appeared within Suna and attempted to capture Gaara for unknown reasons. And while in the beginning of the attack had the upper hand thanks to one of these strangely garbed men being able to fly by animating animals from clay, both he and his partner were dealt with when another strange man appeared almost out of nowhere, and helped Gaara defeat and kill the attacking men. When later asked who the person was who aided Gaara by both his council as well as an investigation out of backup squad from Konoha, Gaara, Kankuro and Temari all recited the same answer with knowing smiles: an unknown guardian of Suna. Then when questioned about what citizens who said they saw this person and testified to them having both tails and ears reminiscent of a fox, and asked if it was Naruto, the siblings answered with the same smiles: "The desert can play tricks on the minds of anyone, but whomever this was had no such appendages, but will be a welcomed hero to Suna should they ever return." As far as the elemental nations as a whole are concerned, only 2 events occurred within the last 3 years that were noteworthy. The first one being the emergence of a new hidden village in the isolated nation of Snow. The hidden village of Snow to be exact. The emergence occurred a year after the Oto out off Suna invasion when the Chunin exams were being held in Suna. A single squad of Snow Genin and their Junin instructor entered the exams, making all the other participating nations quirk an eyebrow considering the rumors of the village only just erecting months prior. Yet here was a Genin squad in the exams which, as per the rules stated, made said village an official village of the elemental nations. Not only was their presence surprising to most, but their performance left many mouths gaping in shock. The Snow Genin swept past their competitors in the first and second parts of the exams, and upon the final matches completely dominated the field, and their opponents with simplistic but logical strategies, and the barest use of jutsu of the simplest type that every shinobi knew. Their entire presence in the finals left many of the more influential Orzen's members make a mental note to try out the new village for missions. If their genin were capable of feats as great as the ones they just witnessed while using no specialized jutsu, just imagine how strong the older shinobi in the village must be when they do use them. Ever since those exams, Snow Country and more importantly its hidden village had been blessed with an overflow of clients seeking their strength for whatever missions they needed. Not only did they receive an influx of clients which allowed the isolated country to thrive greatly, but the clients left so satisfied with the shinobi they were given as well as the job performance that after only a year of the village having official status, the nickname around the waterhole for the village was, Never Fail, Snow. Not only were clients eagerly interested in the village for missions, but even the top leading hidden villages began to consider alliance proposals between themselves and the quickly rising village. Unfortunately, when any diplomatic shinobi envoys entered the frozen village to speak with the Shodaime Yukikage and their intentions of an alliance were spoken, they were politely asked to leave the country with a simple statement of, "We are not interested in an alliance at this time," by the Snow emissary. None of the envoys were even allowed an audience with the Yukikage directly. In fact, the only people that had an inkling to who the Yukikage was seemed to be the Kazekage himself and his two siblings when they went to Snow Country personally. When asked by their allies in Konoha who the Shodaime was, Gaara smirked that knowing smirk of his and stated, "I'm sorry, but the conference between my siblings, the Yukikage and myself are a matter of Suna's internal security, you understand." The fact that no one but 3 people and the citizens of Snow itself knew who the Kage of the ever-growing village was left a slightly paranoid taste in the mouths of many feudal lords and the remaining 4 greater Kages. Their paranoia was so great in fact that the village hidden in Snow had to deal with several hundred attempts of spies trying to either integrate themselves into the village to learn its secrets, or question the populace about the village pretending to be tourists, most of their questions concerning the infamous Yukikage. However, it seemed that the remaining nations only learned several things about the village. 1. Their security was amazingly efficient, and hard to penetrate if nigh impossible. Some of the spies testified saying it was as if the moment they entered the gates of the village the shinobi already know they were spies. 2. The Yukikage and Snow Daimyo Kazuhana Kyuubi have known each other for several years, which made itself known by the sheer fact that Kyuubi had been the one to nominate the Yukikage for the position personally, which showed that she trusted this person so much she left the security of her entire country in their hands. 3. The citizens of Snow Country loved and were deathly loyal to Kyuubi for taking over the mantle of daimyo from her deranged uncle, and were transversely just as loyal to the Yukikage when Kyuubi announced the establishment of their own hidden village and introduced the Kage of said village. And to solidify their trust, Kyuubi and the Yukikage swore a blood oath in the Kage's public inauguration which promised and established a true trust, understanding, and loyalty between the two leaders. And after the ceremony ended, Kyuubi requested that should the citizens be asked anything about the hidden village and especially about the Yukikage himself to either give a vague answer or no answer at all, for the reasons that should the Yukikage's identity be found out too early by other villages they will try to coerce or even attack for who the Kage was. Upon learning these facts, the nations trying to find out more of the new village gave up, realizing that many of the easier avenues for getting information were shut down, and with the village still so small and rather insignificant aside from its secrecy and rising reputation was not worth the trouble into putting in any real shinobi effort to learning their secrets. The final and most important event that was currently going on within the elemental nations was actually the 4th Shinobi War, which had been going on for well over a year. After the events of the Oto out of Suna invasion, the enemies of Konoha began to meet secretly for the next 2 years. Kumo, Oto, Iwa, and even Kiri had begun talks as well as establish alliances with one another, all with the main purpose of destroying the strongest hidden village. Meanwhile, Jiraiya and his spy network was able to give Konoha enough time to begin building its own forces and alliances up to fight back against a very powerful threat. Konoha, Suna, and even Whirlpool were the main leaders, with many smaller nations giving support in their own ways. In truth, the wild card was Snow Country and its village, which by the time the war had officially begun grew quite powerful both militarily and politically. The possibilities this new village posed was actually the main reason each of the nations tried to get its allegiance, and had even tried recruiting once more weeks before the initial conflict which brought the war to official status occurred. Many battles and skirmishes occurred throughout all of the elemental nations during the year-long war, which only increased in frequency, size, bloodshed, and casualty rates as the war raged on. Despite being outnumbered almost 2-1, Konoha, Suna, and Whirlpool kept the war at a stalemate thanks to their superior skills of their shinobi, though mostly due to the Kazekage Jinchuriki and Uzumaki clan with their blood limit. Presently, despite its short length compared to past wars that raged on for over several decades, this one was winding down quite quickly, and the KIKO alliance decided to end the war with this next and last decisive battle. The alliance was so sure of their victory that they even sent out a challenge scroll to Konoha setting a time and date for the battle. And even went so far as to give Konoha and her allies the home field advantage. The battle was to take place within Konoha's borders. Konoha had no choice but to accept the terms the scroll laid down, and prepared with her allies for the final battle of this war, and pray that they'd not only survive but win. Fire Country, several miles from Konoha. At the assigned area for the final battle, the combined armies of Konoha, Suna, and Whirlpool gathered early to prepare strategies. The mood amongst the shinobi was quiet and somber, many of the veterans remembering this feeling from the Third War, while the newer shinobi were quite on edge about the wild situation. As the soldiers mentally prepared for the battle, inside the Hokage's tent, resided the four generals of the army, Tsunade the Slug Sananen Hokage, Jiraiya the Toad Hermit, Gaara the Ichibi Jinchuriki and Kazekage, and Uzumaki Kushina clan head of the Uzumaki clan, along with Konoha's military strategist Nara Shikamaru, heir to the Nara clan. The 5 people were huddled over a large map of the surrounding area in which the battle would take place. What do you think, Shikamaru? Tsunade questioned worriedly. They had been discussing strategies for several hours already, and only a handful of the hundreds of plans thought up would even remotely work. This left the generals rather shaken about their victory. The Nara heir looked at the map with many pieces splayed about representing battalions of shinobi for both the enemy and allies. Truth be told, Hokage-sama, given what we know about the enemy as well as ourselves. It's looking quite troublesome. Even with the advantage of knowing the land better than our enemies, they still have our troops outnumbered 2 to 1. We have a little over 1,000 shinobi to their over 2,000. Most normal strategies can't work in our situation, we'd simply be overpowered if we tried them. He explained while his brain continued to run through countless scenarios of battle strategies and plans that will allow their side to win. But still, we've been outnumbered this entire war and have still kept it as much as a stalemate as we could for the past year. Kushina countered. That's true, Uzumaki-san, but the problem is that at the beginning of the war we were only fighting registered and loyal shinobi from the 4 countries. But now it's different. Orochimaru has gotten greedy and desperate to annihilate us, and has not only given most of his own forces his cursed seal, but has convinced the Mizukage, Tsuchikage, and Reikage to drop the missing nin status of any missing nin from their respective countries who join the war effort. We could compensate for the numerous shinobi they had in the beginning, but with these new and unknown shinobi joining their ranks, it's impossible to counteract against powers we don't know. Not only that, but we've lost many powerful shinobi who were the main cause of the stalemate lasting, most notably many brave Uzumakis. Jiraiya said sagely with a frown, making Kushina look down, remembering her fallen kin. Kazekage-sama, what news from Snow? Has the Yukikage changed his mind? Tsunade asked hopefully. Gaara simply shook his head negatively, while mentally frowning at the fact that he finally relented to Konoha's childishly annoying questioning of the Yukikage's identity, and finally broke his promise by telling him the Yukikage is a male. Damn it, she cursed under her breath while biting her red-painted nails, a nervous habit she picked up when she was growing up. Nara-san, what is our best option? Kushina asked, making Shikamaru sigh in frustration. From the terrain as well as where the 2 armies will probably meet in battle. Quote. He paused before moving a few of the pieces on the map around, before pointing to an area with no trees in the middle of the map. Make a chain of exploding notes and flash tags that run across this clearing. We activate the tags when they are close. The exploding tags should take out a nice chunk of the First Legion, while the flash tags as well as the smoke from the explosions will give us enough of a distraction and smokescreen for your clan to use their most powerful jutsu while they can't see us. He explained, getting nods of acceptance from the generals. Other than that plan and a few others I could literally count on my hand, this battle will be as straightforward as it can get. Deception, sneak attacks, and guerrilla warfare won't help us anymore. In a word, this battle is gonna be troublesome, he finished, making the already tense mood even worse. Gaara stood up from his chair before crossing his arms across his chest, and headed towards the tent flaps. This battle would be no contest if we had Naruto. Gaara whispered, but loud enough for everyone in the tent to hear before he left. His statement left a pang of shame and guilt in the hearts of the remaining generals who now looked towards the ground. It's troublesome, but H is right, you know. Not only would Naruto's strength and transversely Natsume's be of great assistance to us, but their presence would allow for several of my better plans to not only succeed but do so with devastating efficiency. He retorted with a sigh. Only a moment after he said this did a hand smack down against the table loudly. We know that, Tsunade shouted angrily, before she fell back to the sadness she'd been feeling moments ago. But we screwed up, all three of us, we fed up his life back then, and now we are paying for it with our heartache from the guilt and shame, and the loss of his strength when we need it most. But we can't depend on Naruto coming to our rescue, and we shouldn't expect him to, especially after what we have done. We ruined his life and shouldn't expect him to help us in any fashion in this battle. He has no reason to help us. She spoke, her voice slightly breaking, denoting the emotions she now felt. We can't worry about heroes and of what ifs. We are about to fight a war, and we can't be thinking about the mistakes of our pasts. If we do, then none of us will have a present nor a future. We need to prepare. Jiraiya ordered, though his face was one of sadness as well, expressing that he too was thinking of the wrongs he committed towards his godson. The tent was silent for a minute before all of them stood up, silently adjourning their meeting. I'll go check on Sakura and the medic nins to make sure they have everything prepared. Tsunade volunteered before leaving the tent. I'll continue with strategies back in my tent, Shikamaru stated, grabbing the map and heading out. I'll get the Junins to prepare that explosion out off #tag chain. Jiraiya volunteered, giving a quick glance towards the deathly silent Kushina before leaving with a frown. Kushina, as if waking up from a deep sleep, looked up from the ground and noticed that she was now alone inside the tent. A strange sensation gripped her heart at the realization, a sensation almost reminiscent of fear or apprehension. Is this how you felt after I left you, Naruto? She mentally questioned, guilt and shame grasping her heart even tighter. Kami-sama, I'm the worst Kar-san in the world, she declared, shutting her eyes tightly as a few tears fell down her cheeks. Quote, I would do anything to make things up to you, Naruto, gomenasai. After Kushina's mental monologue, she wiped the remaining tears from her eyes, and left the tent determined to spend some quality time with her three children before she prepared her clan for the battle. With Tsunade, 1 hour later. Sakura, make sure everything is ready for when the battle begins. I'm counting on you to keep everyone in line. I didn't teach you my strength jutsu for only battles, you know. Tsunade ordered harshly before softening with a joke, hoping to release the tension in the air within the medic tent. Sensei? Sakura questioned in a worried whisper. Tsunade turned to her student, and saw the worry and lack of confidence written all over her face and body language. Tsunade frowned at her student, not in shame for her lack of confidence, but for the fact she had to send out teenagers, babies compared to her in age, into war, and more than likely the graves. She moved towards her student and embraced her in a hug, which surprised the peak girl. Gomenasai, Sakura, gomen that I must put so much pressure on your shoulders. Quote. She apologized. But if nothing else, take to heart that I gave you the responsibility of leading the medics because of one simple thing, faith. I have great faith in you, Haruno Sakura. As my student for the past 3 years, I know what you're capable of as well as what you'll be capable of in the future. And I wouldn't give you leadership of this division if I wasn't absolutely sure of your abilities to carry it out with extraordinary success. Sakura was rather taken aback by her teacher's confession. Sure, she knew she was Tsunade's best student next to Shizune. But to be praised so outrightly by the legendary medic nin herself, it was not only an honor but unbelievable. Sakura couldn't help but let a few tears fall down her cheeks before wrapping her arms around the pseudo-bombshell blonde. Arigato Tsunade-sensei. I don't know what to say, I'm honored. You don't have to say anything, Sakura, just do your best to lead these medics. Use what I've taught you not only as a medic but as a leader to help out those who need it. Hi sensei. The two drifted apart with small smiles towards one another, before Tsunade turned to leave the tent. The Hokage paused after opening the flap of the green medic tent, and looked over her shoulder towards Sakura, who was still looking at her. Stay strong, Sakura, and do your best, she said, another smile on her lips. And one last thing. Consider this my final order to you as Hokage before the battle starts. Hokage-sama. A Junin who was obviously a Hyuga by his lavender-colored eyes shouted while running towards the tent. What is it? The blonde quirked a worried brow from hearing the fear and hesitation in the Junin's voice. My team has acquired the location of the Kyuubi Alliance's army. He explained, getting wide-eyed expressions from those who heard. They will be at ground zero in 30 minutes. Tsunade's eyes narrowed to SS, as she gritted her teeth and clenched her hands at the unfortunate news. Understood, good work. Report the news to the other generals and Nara Shikamaru before returning to your team. She ordered. Hi Hokage-sama. The Junin acknowledged before rushing off. Sensei. Sakura quired, noticing the body language of her teacher. You heard him, Sakura. Prepare for war. Let all the medics know to be ready in 30 minutes. Tsunade said almost emotionlessly, not even turning to address her student. Hi Sensei. The younger medic almost yipped out in pain at hearing her teacher speak in such a way she never heard before. Ano Sensei, what was the final order you wished to give me before the Junin interrupted? She asked, her curiosity getting the better of her despite the situation. Survive. Tsunade answered after a tense moment passed between the two, before leaving the tent and Sakura to muse on what the aged leader meant. Sakura stood silently going over their conversation as well as the full meaning of her teacher's order and final word. Sakura was shaken out of her thoughts when another blonde shook her. Oi billboard brow, you okay? Ino asked with concern. Sakura slowly turned towards her childhood friend as if not recognizing her at first, before her expressions lightened suddenly and she smiled. Hi. Everything is fine, Ino pig. Sensei was just giving me some last-minute orders. She explained, getting an understanding though slightly skeptical nod from Ino. Let's go. We have to make sure everything is ready. We may not be fighting like the others, but our jobs are just as important. She ordered in a warmer tone than previously, getting a smile and nod from her partner in crime. The pair headed towards another section of the tent, when Sakura stopped and turned towards the entrance where her teacher stood minutes ago. Arigato Sensei, for giving me the encouragement I needed. I promise to not fail in your orders and your faith, she mentally declared with an expression of new confidence and an appreciative smile, before turning back and catching up with her blonde comrade. With Jiraiya. Good, keep up the pace with the chain. We need it completed and set up properly before the enemy gets here. Jiraiya shouted towards the various Junins who were connecting every exploding and flash tag they had in a long chain. Jiraiya-sama, do you think this will really work? Kakashi questioned, not out of insubordination but in worry over how such a simplistic trap will get such great results like the Nara Air predicted. I don't know Kakashi, but that boy is far smarter than I despite the years of experience I have over him. But he is completely right about one thing. No amount of deception will help us greatly. This battle to end the war will be one of the bluest in shinobi history. But if we can take out even a dozen of their shinobi with this trap, then that's that many less we have to fight ourselves later. Jiraiya answered. Jiraiya-sama is correct, Hataki-san. My Sochi is far smarter than us, despite my unrelenting annoyance to admit it. And while his plans, this one included, may not seem probable to work to most of us veterans, when that boy puts his mind to something I will never bet against him no matter the odds. Shikaku said nonchalantly, though with a small hint of pride hidden in his tone while continuing to tie the tags together. Kakashi relented to his peer's words, feeling slightly more satisfied with hearing others' faith in the younger shinobi. Jiraiya-sama. A voice shouted in the distance, making everyone stop what they were doing and look on to see a Hyuga Junin running towards them. Calm down, calm down. Jiraiya chided, allowing the man a minute to catch his breath. Now what's the matter? No available outhouses to use while reading my novels. The aged Sanin joked, making many snicker, and the Hyuga actually blushed before he reined in his embarrassment. I'd be much happier if that were the case, Jiraiya-sama. I have news from the front, he announced, making the smiles turn cold. The Kyuubi Alliance will be here in less than 25 minutes. Any form of positive emotions or body language within listening distance of the Hyuga completely vanished in the shinobi at that moment. Now stood the return of the battle-hardened shinobi who have fought in great past wars. I see. I'll assume that you have already spoken to Tsunade-sama. The Toad Sanin asked, the once jovialness in his voice now gone, getting a nod as his answer. Good. Then continue on the orders I'm sure she has given you. He ordered. Hi Jiraiya-sama. The Junin acknowledged before running off. So 25 minutes ne. Asuma mused, the hidden meaning behind his words being understood by all, while taking an exaggerated drag from his cigarette. Then you know how much time you have to finish this. Jiraiya answered, his voice sending shivers down the few Junin who never went into battle with the Toad Sannin. You have 15 minutes. Karensai-san. Jiraiya almost barked out, making the Genjutsu mistress slightly jump at being called. Hi. I want you to use whatever your strongest Genjutsu is to hide this trap. Use a TSLE layered Genjutsu if you have to, I don't care, but get it done. Do whatever it takes to keep this from being found out. By the time you're finished, I don't want even those damn traitorous Uchiha brothers to be able to unravel this trap. Is that understood? Hi Jiraiya-sama. She acknowledged, feeling not only a bit of worry at the sheer pressure of her objective, but also a swell of pride that the legendary, though still perverted, Sannin held enough faith in her skills to call upon her by name to complete this mission. Good. He spoke before turning his back to the gathered Junin. If I'm needed for whatever reason, you'll find me with Tsunade-sama as the designated point. He explained before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. With Shikamaru. Shikamaru, you gotta be kidding me. Why couldn't you have thought of more plans than just this? Kiba shouted accusingly at the lazy genius, while the remaining Konoha 9 stood around the table with the battle maps played out in the Nara's tent. I already discussed this with the generals, Kiba. He answered, making the Inuzuka heir snort in annoyance. Without more troops, or a few more cage-level shinobi to help strengthen the defenses, or overpower the enemy, many of my more dangerous but more lethal plans just can't work. Kiba-kun, please stop. Shikamaru-san is trying his best to give us plans that are still viable to work for us. Yelling at him about the lack of plans when it isn't his fault that we don't have the necessary manpower isn't helping. Hinata said, trying to diffuse Kiba's anger, which succeeded when he just crossed his arms, turned his back to the group and snorted indignantly. All of his plans could probably work if Nei-chan and Naruto-nisan were here. Kiba whispered more to himself than the others, but it was clear that all of them heard him. Kiba had been more than distraught when Konoha lost Naruto's trail after he entered Suna, and was quite jaded like many Inuzukas towards the village as a whole for what they did to him, which inevitably trickled down to his peers accidentally, who usually accepted his actions at face value for that reason. It's funny you should say that, since the Kazekage said the exact same thing during my discussion with the generals. Shikamaru retorted after laughing lowly. But as Hokage-sama so bluntly put it, we fed up, and because of what Konoha did, and continued to do to him, Naruto will not come to help us. Even if we did know where he was and asked him to, not that we have any right. He resigned, before looking back towards the map and took his, thinking, pose. Nara-san. A voice yelled through the tent. That sounds like Tetsuo-san, Hinata stated when everyone's attention turned towards the tent flaps. Hinata volunteered to allow the Hyuga entrance to the tent, and did so quickly, noting the sound of his voice's urgency. The Hyuga took a moment to catch his breath before relaying the message for a third time. Nara-san, by Hokage-sama's orders I am to inform all of the generals as well as yourself about a development. He explained, getting the undivided attention of the strategist as well as his friends. The Kiko alliance will be at ground zero in less than 20 minutes. The reactions were the same as when the man told others, pure shock and worry. Shikamaru sighed loudly at the news. In truth, he knew the alliance would be coming soon, other than the fact that the day and time was predetermined. Troublesome, go finish your mission then. I'll meet with the other generals at the designated point. He ordered lazily, but with enough emotion for everyone to know it was an order and not a suggestion. Hi Nara-san. Tetsuo acknowledged, though truthfully getting annoyed at being the general's errand boy. What should we do? Kiba asked, his attitude from before completely washed away by the news, returning him to the cool-headed albeit shy shinobi he usually was. Go to your families, spend these last few minutes with them, tell them you love them, because within 20 minutes from now you may never get another chance. Shikamaru answered grimly, but at this point in time coddling shinobi would only hinder their resolve to do what must be done, at least honor them by not lying, especially to their faces. The group shifted uncomfortably, before Shikamaru sighed once more and bobbed his head towards the tent flaps. Be safe, all of you, I want to see you all after this is over, you hear me? Kiba growled out before leaving the tent. Everyone knew he didn't mean it in a negative fashion, it was just how the young man was. Take care everyone, I wish for your health and our victory. Hinata said quietly with a small bow before leaving. Shino, always the quiet one of the group, simply looked at the remaining duo and nodded in recognition before leaving. Well, if you ever quit being a shinobi, you could always work as a motivational speaker, Shikamaru. Chuji joked. Yeah, well, you know me, Chuji. The lazy shinobi stated nonchalantly. Troublesome ne. His large friend offered with a smirk. Troublesome, Shikamaru agreed, adorning his own smirk now, draping an arm over his friend's shoulders before the two walked out of the tent. With Gaara, so he really isn't coming? Temari asked her youngest brother, with her other brother and Baki sitting inside the Kazekige's tent. In his last letter he apologized for not being able to help us, but he makes a good point. Asking him to help us doesn't entail just him. If he joins us, his entire village will be dragged in with him, guilt by association as it were. Gaara answered while shaking his head, making the others look down in understandable disappointment. I can understand that, it's just, we could really use him on this one. Kankuro retorted, getting a nod from his sister. I have no doubt that his help would greatly increase our chances of winning this battle, but we don't have the ability to walk down that avenue now. Gaara argued. There is no point on discussing topics that aren't of immediate concern to us. Baki cut in sagely. Quote. Kazekige-sama, what do you want us to do? He questioned. The plans are already in place, Baki-san. Simply be ready to execute any orders given, and from there do what we do best. He ordered, a small sadistic grin crossing his lips as his bloodthirst rose, making his siblings and sensei smirk the same. Kazekige-sama, a voice shouted from the tent outside. Enter, the Jinchuriki ordered calmly. Arigato Kazekige-sama. Tetsuo greeted, taking a small breather. Quote. I've come to inform the generals as per the orders of Hokage-sama that the Kiko alliance will be at ground zero in approximately 15 minutes. He explained, getting dark expressions on the sand shinobi upon hearing the news. I see, arigato for your notification. If your orders aren't complete yet, please continue. Gaara spoke. Hi Kazekige-sama. Tetsuo acknowledged before leaving to find the last general. Well, Kakuro inquired. Gaara stood up from his chair, taking his infamous crossed-arm stance. Prepare for war, he ordered, cut and dry, before heading for the tent flaps. If I'm needed, I'll be at the designated point, he concluded before leaving. This is gonna be a long day, isn't it? Kankuro questioned, half-jokingly, making Temari smile at his attempt at humor. You just don't want to smudge your makeup, she joked before leaving a raging Kankuro and chuckling Baki within the tent. This is war paint, Kami-sama, damn it, he shouted, making many who heard look strangely at the tent from which the shout originated, before seeing a very pissed Kankuro stomping out. At least they can try to enjoy the last peaceful minutes before all hell breaks loose. Baki said to himself while shaking his head, still chuckling lightly before leaving the tent himself to prepare. With Kushina. So wait. Valios began, his voice one of agitation after hearing his mother's retelling of the generals' meeting. They want us to once again attack on the front lines during this half-assed trap that probably won't even work. Our clan already SD many members to seal the damned Kyuubi into its new body. Now they want us to be front and center again. He questioned, his anger boiling over at the audacity of Konoha asking his clan to basically S itself again to save their own skin, and even worse, less powerful shinobi. Valios-kun. Kushina retorted sharply, making said child slightly flinch. Remember that though she was his mother, she was also still a revered Junin in both Whirlpool and Konoha, with abilities on par with the Sannin. Meanwhile, Kushina wanted to slap him for basically calling Naruto a demon. But in truth, she'd just be a hypocrite if she reprimanded him for it, even if she'd be right doing so considering her own hateful slogans and teachings towards the Hanyu years ago. You know why the generals would ask this of our clan. Quote. She stated coldly. In the branch of the shinobi arts called ninjutsu, no one is our equal. Not even the revered Uchihas with their Kekkei Genkai and its abilities could match us in that field. What our army needs is strength, since we lack numbers, meaning we are the strength of the army and are thusly to be used as the leaders and myself see fit. And I happen to agree with them on the matter. If we lack the main component that the Nara heir needs for the majority of his plans to succeed, then we need to take advantage of any and all plans that can still work. She explained as a seasoned veteran of several wars would, which although made Valios begrudgingly conceded to her point, grunted as a last act of rebellion to the plan. And what shall we do after this plan is concluded? Kyushiro asked, who now sported a custom-made patch over his eye, with the symbol for infinity on the patchwork. We defeat our enemies, what else? Valios answered quickly as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. As the two brothers spoke, Kushina glanced over as her daughter, who hadn't spoken a word about the plans either for or against it since she recapped the general's meeting. As the better strategist of the three siblings, she was curious as to her input. Kasumi-chan, Kushina inquired, but got no answer from the young girl, who looked like she was deep in thought. Kasumi-chan, she questioned again, only more forcefully, making her hair jump slightly at the tone of voice as well as apparently just realizing she was being spoken to. Gomenasai Ka-san, hi, what is it? Kasumi spoke, her voice expressing her shaken mentality. Kushina slightly glared at her daughter, almost as if she was sizing her up for some reason. Kasumi felt her mother's hard gaze directed upon her and couldn't help but fidget slightly as if being under a microscope, which under normal circumstances she'd be fine with since her mother did this many times during their training sessions before giving the girl and her brothers critiques on their spars. Unfortunately, this was no ordinary situation for Kasumi, because for the past 3 years since she returned to Whirlpool, she had used Naruto's Hiraishin kunai to talk, train, and confide in him several dozen times. And until this moment had been able to keep the siblings' secret rendezvous hidden from the rest of her clan. However, because of her and Naruto's new and greatly improved relationship, so much Srh's actually called her Imuoto, little sister, on several occasions, she began keeping the kunai as a sort of good luck charm on her persons nearly all the time. And this moment was no different, obvious by the fact that if one were to look behind her back, they would find her unconsciously fingering the edges of the kunai in a slightly loving manner. Thankfully for Kasumi, however, her back was facing the tent, so none of her family noticed, even if she was acting slightly suspicious at the moment for her jumpiness. Nothing, Kasumi-chan, Kushina finally answered, after reining in her harsh gaze from upon her daughter. Quote, ... I simply wished to hear your opinion on the matter we have been discussing. She explained. Kasumi took a moment to think, mainly because while she had still been listening to the discussion, the majority of her thoughts were on how the main part of the battle would later play out. As well as silently wishing that Naruto were here, not only to reassure her as a brother, and one of her few friends, but to reassure her a warrior in this coming battle, since he was one of, if not the strongest person she had ever met. And to have him there by her side would relieve a good amount of anxiety she was currently having. While I've never met the Nara heir personally, we have all seen how he fights in both the preliminary and final matches in the Chunin exams several years ago. So despite his lethargic attitude towards most things, his mind is one of a genius, rather ironic really. The mind of a genius in the body of a sloth. So his position as Konoha's military strategist as well as this entire army's is well deserved, albeit partially. But as far as his plan goes, I believe that Ka-san is correct in believing that this plan, while threatening the clan once again, will have a success rate high enough to be worth the risk we'll be taking. She explained, not only surprising her family but herself as her explanation, considering a lot of her attention was elsewhere. All right, I get it. I get it. Valios conceded, throwing his hands in the air in mock defeat. Quote, ... I still don't like it though. None of us do, but it's the best plan we could come up with the limited resources we have at our disposal. Kushina countered, before standing up and stretched her back. Uzumaki-sama. A shout from outside the tent made the family jump at the suddenness and loudness. Hi, what is it? Kushina called back, before the Hyuga entered the tent, face cherry red while panting. Kiko half a lion's pant here, gasped 10 minutes. He answered, collapsing onto a knee, not being able to see the shocked expressions of the Uzumaki family. Bastards came early. Valios cursed, clenching his hands. True, but our trap should be finished, or close to it by now. Kyushiro responded before standing up from his chair heading towards the exit. If it was Konoha who set up the trap, then they'd have assigned Yuhi Kurenai Genjutsu detail. I shall go see if she requires any assistance on my part. He offered. You sure the assistance is for Genjutsu? And not actually to throw her over a table and screw her brains out in pleasure until she screams, Shiro-sama. Single quote question mark quote. Valios couldn't help but joke, before laughing loudly at seeing Kyoshiro's face redden at the barb. After all, the usually emotionless Kyoshiro was a hard man to get any blackmail on, so the moment Valios found out a year ago that the Genjutsu no Mahoutsukai, wizard of Genjutsu, actually had a thing for Konoha's own Genjutsu mistress, he had to milk it for all it was worth, but the one thing he couldn't ever say about Kyoshiro was that he lacked taste in women. Yui Kurenai was certainly all woman despite being a powerful and respectable Junin. From her soft raven black hair, ruby red eyes, pouty pink lips, generous bust, sensuous curves, her supple and round ass, to her long-toned and silky legs. Kyoshiro couldn't have picked a better female to fawn over than Yui Kurenai, and Valios was damn proud. Thankfully for Kyoshiro, his mother came to his rescue before Valios actually made him answer the question, when a loud smack could be heard. Valios-kun, not only are you in the presence of ladies, but I've also taught you better than to speak with such vulgarity. Kushina spoke coldly as her eldest son rubbed the back of his head in pain. Gee. Gomen-ka-san, he apologized. Arigato for the information, Hyuga-san. Please finish your missions if you haven't already. Kushina ordered softly, her tone normal again after getting a satisfactory apology from her son. Uzumaki-sama, Tetsuo acknowledged before leaving the tent to go finally back to his team. Valios-kun, Kasumi-chan, prepare. The battle will begin shortly. If you need me, you know where to find me. Kushina offered before swiftly leaving. I'm gonna head out, Nei-chan. I've already prepared as best I could and I want to see what the battlefield looks like before we get started. Valios stated before leaving the tent, and Kasumi alone. Kasumi waited a full minute before standing up and pulled her arms out in front of her, looking at the kunai in her hands. Please give me your strength, Oni-chan. Kasumi gave a little prayer before pocketing the kunai for safekeeping and leaving the tent, never noticing a pair of eyes that watched the interaction and heard the words just spoken before vanishing. Ground Zero, designated point. So this is it. Tsunade mused, the weight of her words being understood by the gathered generals and Nara as they looked ahead towards the once green forest of fire country that now turned black from the march of the Kiko alliance. Seems so. Jiraiya answered. Are the preparations ready? Hi. The several plans and tag chain trap are in place, as per ordered Hokage-sama. He answered once again. Finally going to show me some respect that my station deserves. Tsunade questioned, looking at her old teammate with a smirk. Figured now's as good a time as any. He shot back, smirking as well. Speaking of time, we still have enough for a quickie. Suheim could make for an interesting war cry, he joked. Can't even stay serious for 10 seconds before you say or do something perverted. I swear you're hopeless. She laughed despite the situation, making the others smirk and their spirits lift slightly. The small reprieve of the situation soon left, however, and they all turned back towards the enclosing army. Tsunade and Jiraiya's expressions darkened, their eyes narrowing to SS when they were able to make out certain individuals, more specifically their old teammate walking at the front of the army with the other cages. I was a fool to let him live back in that forest all those years ago. Jiraiya grunted in anger. That you were, but we all have done foolish things in our pasts. Kami-sama, have we been foolish? She retorted. But all you can do is try to amend your mistakes, and by the end of the day either this particular one will be, or we'll be S. She resigned. It seems they wish to speak with us before the S begins. Gaara cut in, after having focused some demonic chakra to enhance his sight. The others looked at the approaching army for what he meant before it was close enough for them to see a white flag being waved in the air. Shall we greet them then? Tsunade questioned, turning her back to the army before she and her comrades walked back to their own army. Upon a clearing in the middle of the two assembled armies stood the generals of both sides, along with a small group of bodyguards. Orochimaru, the Raikage, Tsuchikage, and the Mizukage on one side with Tsunade, Gaara, Kushina, and Jiraiya on the other. I believe it's a call for celebration, the reunion of all three legendary Sannin back in the Land of Fire. Orochimaru began with his infamous smile on full blast. The other two Sannin clenched their fists at the joke, before Jiraiya spoke. The only celebration that is happening is the eve of your death, and the victory for us in this war. He spoke, his voice clearly stating he didn't like the Snake Sannin's words. You wound me, Jiraiya-kun. The pale man retorted, raising a hand to clutch his chest in mock pain. But then again, you never were one for intelligent banter. unless it had to do with women's measurements. However, since it is the eve of our reunion, I'll forgive your wicked tongue. He spoke, making Jiraiya grunt on anger. We are about to do battle, Orochimaru. Exactly what kind of banter did you expect in such a situation? Kushina spoke up, trying to defend the Toad Sannin. Ah, Kushina-san, it's been such a long time since we've last spoke. How is Minato-kun and Naruto-kun doing? He began before pausing in pseudo-shock at what he just said. My apologies, slip of the tongue. He concluded, with his shock growing into a satisfied smirk, which grew even wider at seeing the Uzumaki head's angry, shameful, and sorrowful reaction. Well, you don't have to answer if you don't wish, but to answer your own. I was simply wishing to have a pleasurable conversation with my teammates before the battle, nothing more. His smirk turning into a sugar-sweet smile that, if those who saw it didn't know him, would actually believe his words being true. That's rather surprising, Orochimaru. Tsunade interceded while taking a step forward, getting everyone's attention. Quote, I never would have pegged you for the sentimental type, unless it had to do with your snakes. In truth, I suspected that this was all an elaborate trap to get the leaders out in the open without having to go through the army. She accused with a smile that hinted at extreme pain if he spoke the wrong words. Orochimaru couldn't help but laugh soundly at her accusation. My Tsunade, I have truly forgotten how amusing you can be in a conversation. Quote. He chuckled. As for your thoughts, I'm hurt that you would think so little of me to prepare a sneak attack against you when I called for this meeting. I mean, really, what kind of man would I be if I purposely called you all out here in the middle of this clearing, with only the barest of minimums for protecting yourselves, where I could lay down several traps in the area that you wouldn't even know about until it was too late, and there would be nothing your army could do to save you? He questioned, a smirk gracing his lips as he spoke. You wouldn't be a man, you'd be a snake. Tsunade answered bluntly, with both a hint of annoyance and apprehension. I suppose you're right on that account. He answered, that satisfied and sadistic smirk still on his lips, before out of the ground behind him and his cage cohorts shot hundreds of snakes, which had their mouths open with his kusinagi sticking out. Now usually Jiraiya and Tsunade would have seen a trap like this coming, but the thing that threw him off track was the fact that not only did they not detect the snakes until hay erupted from the ground, but that they also shot through the boss of the three cages and Orochimaru himself, splattering blood across the field. The sheer sight making the other generals hesitate, wondering what was going on. Unfortunately, that short hesitation was all that was needed for the snakes to get in range of them and not allow time to escape. Suna no Kakuheiki, barrier wall of sand. Gaara spoke coldly, not batting an eye at the snake's sneak attack, as a large wall of hardened sand shot up between the incoming snakes and his allies. You knew he was lying about wanting to talk? Tsunade questioned, while mentally berating herself for not only still trusting her teammate if only slightly, but not thinking up a trap herself in such a perfect situation. No, but I had taken measures in case he did. Gaara answered, his concentration on the wall, feeling the snakes collide into the wall, but was surprised when the snakes seemed to push through the wall at great speeds as if the sand wasn't even there. They are breaking through, he warned, making Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Kushina tense at the news. With that amount of snakes coming, normal escape for most of their bodyguards was impossible, and summoning would take too long, along with crushing their allies. Everyone get back! Jiraiya shouted to the guards, despite its futility at such a late warning. Moments later, to the rage and worry of the generals, the snakes broke through the sand barrier, barreling towards them with sly velocity and aim. Kitsune Ise Ru, Kitsune Geitu, fox cry style, fox cloak. A shout coming from seemingly everywhere was heard before a lone red-hilted katana descended from the heavens, piercing the earth only a yard in front of Gaara and the others. Begin playing, Meteor by TM. Revolution. A moment after the sword split the earth, it began to pulse with energy before the energy itself shot forth from the blade and encompassed all of the generals and bodyguards in a purple barrier which soon took shape resembling the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The pure shock of this development kept all the shinobi from panicking over having a large fox standing over them. Especially those from Konoha, and not knowing where it came from. However, what shocked them even more was what they witnessed next. The head of the fox bowed down in front of the generals when the snakes were within striking distance. The snakes collided with the fox's head and were immediately stopped as a power struggle occurred. As the onlookers watched, not quite knowing what power to silently cheer on, they noticed that the swords protruding from the mouths of the snakes began to crack and splinter before the swords actually broke. With the swords now broken, the snakes' advancement only meant the destruction, for when the snakes touched the fox they immediately disintegrated into nothing. For over a minute the snakes continued their assault on the fox, hoping that numbers would wear the being down, but to no avail, and soon the numbers of snakes dwindled down to nothing. The moment the last snake fell, the fox raised its head before its body tensed and a large purple light flashed across the clearing, making everyone avert their eyes lest they become blind. The light soon vanished, and when everyone looked back to see what happened they were looking on in questioning shock. Before them, where the sword descended and the fox barrier was erected, was now a group of 5 people standing next to each other. "Seems like we just made it," the male in the middle of the group stated, before grabbing the sword. "So it appears that your pitiful alliance was able to recruit the hidden village of Snow at the last minute." Orochimaru's voice called out, as Gaara's-san collapsed, giving Tsunade and the rest a view of what happened to Orochimaru and the other cages after they had been espered by his own jutsu. "What the?" Jiraiya almost yelled out at what he and the rest now saw. Ascending from the ground came Orochimaru and the other cages, all still alive and unharmed with their clothes in pristine order. While at their feet laid 4 corpses with the same wounds Jiraiya and the others saw get inflicted upon Orochimaru only minutes ago. However, these corpses were now of some unidentified shinobi from sound obvious by their music note headbands, but wore the exact same garb as the generals standing above them. "What kind of trick are you pulling?" Tsunade roared. "No trick, Tsunade Haim, just a simple jutsu I picked up on my travels while with a certain organization," the pale man replied coolly. "Orochimaru, I didn't come all this way to talk," the still unknown man interrupted, making everyone turn their attention to the newcomers. "Then why, pray tell, did you?" The snake man smirked. "To talk to the Raikage, Tsuchikage, and Mizukage about why they joined up with you in this alliance. That is before I KU," he answered, allowing some ki to possess the area to make his point clear. "And why should our reasons matter to you, boy?" The Raikage spoke angrily. "Because if they aren't good enough, then I'm afraid my associates and I will have to K not only your men but you as well if you decide to continue fighting in this war," he answered, releasing even more Ki, forcing a few of the Junin to pant heavily from the pressure. "If you really think that 5 more shinobi on your side will help you win, you are sadly mistaken. We have well over double the shinobi you do," the Tsuchikage snidely said. "That is certainly true, however. I can be one man." The man began to retort before snapping his fingers and 100 copies of him appeared in a horizontal line. "Or I can be 100. I go." He finished with a wave of his hand, the clones jumping over the mysterious shinobi and towards the Kiko army. Immediately several dozen Junin from Kiko jumped over their generals to stop the incoming threat. The 2 forces met, which surprised both sides when the clones didn't disappear right away until a hard enough hit was landed. Which also meant they were cage bushins, surprising them even more considering that only cage-level shinobi could possibly make that many at one time without passing out or possibly from chakra exhaustion. As the small battle raged on with both sides looking on with almost a morbid curiosity, it ended just as suddenly when in several flashes of orange light all the cage bushins puffed out of existence and the remaining Junins fell to the ground either like the Oto Junin, or knocked out like the rest. Many of the older generations of shinobi realized what the technique was but questioned if it really was that jutsu or something else that simply looked similar. My, it seems this boy has a bit of SK. Orochimaru mused in sick glee and admiration. "It's unfortunate that a weak country like Snow has gained your loyalty. Your strength would be so much better spent with us." He finished, leaving his hidden invitation out in the open. "Do not tempt me to finish what I started here, Orochimaru." The man shot back coldly. "This was simply an ultimatum on my part. Either you postpone this battle for another hour, or I could end it all here. Your little sneak attack already has me in a bad mood, so do not try my patience any longer. Also, Snow isn't their ally, the 5 of us came on our own for our own reasons. Snow Country has nothing to do with this," he announced, his tone denoting no lie or exaggeration. There was a pregnant pause between the man and Orochimaru as they just gazed at one another. Granted, the pale-skinned man could only use his body language to read him, which unfortunately for him gave away no bluff, which meant he wasn't joking, and if he could really do all that with just cage cushions, what else was he capable of when actually fighting himself? Very well, I'll accept your terms for now. Orochimaru resigned with a sadistic smirk before turning his back. We shall return in an hour. He paused while beginning to walk away. Oh, and it was nice to see you again, Naruto-kun. He finished with a knowing grin on his face you could almost see by his jovial tone. End song. The Cages and Kiko army followed the Snake Sannin's orders and left the field abruptly, leaving the opposite army dumbfounded after witnessing what they just did. Tsunade, her entourage and the rest of the army whom had rushed to them after the snake left looked towards the newcomers with questioning expressions, especially the identified male, who looked the oddest out of the group. The man whose back faced them still wore a white cloak reminiscent of the late Yondaime, however several modifications were added to this particular one. The flames licking the bottoms were of an icy blue shade, while the words, Ice Fox, were embroidered down its spine. The very last and most drastic difference was that the lifted collar across the end seemed to have white fur stat into it, resembling that of the Nadaime's armor. The only real thing you could identify about him was his rather unique orange hair. Before anyone could really examine him more, the group swiftly turned around and faced Konoha's army for the first time. However, their identities were still a mystery since all 5 of them wore Anbu-like masks. What? I don't visit for 3 years and this is the greeting I get. I'm disappointed. Ka-san. The man said in mock hurt while turning to gaze directly towards Inuzuka-chum, who looked on wide-eyed at the implications of his words. Naruto-kun? She questioned in a disbelieving whisper, fearing as though saying it too loud would make him disappear. The man's answer was to simply raise his hand, grasping his now identified kitsune mask with 3 icy blue whisker marks on each cheek, and slowly took it off to reveal the smiling face of one Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto, upon noticing the recognition in the eyes of those looking, dropped his henge, making any who still thought it wasn't really him to gasp at being proven wrong, as his 5 tails swished back and forth. It's really you. Kushina whispered in a tone of awe and slight happiness at seeing her son once more. At her words, many looked on to get a better look at the newly arrived Hanyu. Aside from the white cloak they had seen before, Naruto's look had only changed slightly in the past 3 years. His dark orange flak jacket was replaced with a white one that matched his cloak, while the rest of his attire remained the same standard issue Junin pants, sandals, and short sleeve shirt, all in black. The last 2 differences from the past and now were that he now sported resting at the side of each of his hips 2 katanas with their sheaths, obviously being his infamous swords, Shinku Kaijin and Sauten Case. The final and most interesting change was his headband, which was also clothed white and ended at the back of his knees, while the headplate shined with the emblem of the newly born hidden snow village. Why? You're a Yuki shinobi? Tsunade questioned, rather shocked at this little tidbit of information, before screening his 4 companions and noticing that most of them wore the headbands of snow, which others just couldn't be seen at the moment, hidden behind the masks no doubt. Damn right, a feminine voice shouted, a voice that many of the Junin and several Anbu officers from Konoha recognized in a heartbeat. The woman who was to the far left began to move her hand before taking her hebi mask off, to reveal the smirking, hazel-eyed face of one Mitarashi Anko. Anko? Kurenai questioned in shock at seeing her friend after 3 long years. Certainly the letters she received and sent back, which thankfully hadn't been intercepted by the Hokage, was nice. But to see her sister after so long was something no letter could give her. Yo Nai-chan. She greeted back smugly with a happy grin at seeing her sister once again, while leaning on one leg and placing her hand on that hip. The attention turned from Naruto to Anko, who was now surprisingly wearing slightly more modest clothing, though still giving her that appeal she loved to tease with so much. She still wore her infamous beige trench coat and metal shin guards, but the similarities from when she was a Konoha shinobi stopped there. Now, instead of wearing her usual fishnet shirt that left little to men's imagination, she wore an unzipped and open white flak jacket just like Naruto underneath the coat. While under the jacket you could see a midnight black, sleeveless, skin-tight bodysuit that started from her end and ended at her mid-thighs just like her old beige skirt used to. But only someone like Anko could actually wear more clothing than before and yet become even more of a C-tease. Obvious by several male Junan's pants getting incredibly tighter when they saw just how her bodysuit hugged her curves just enough to make you beg for more without being so tight she'd be placed in the category of whorish. And to top off the changes, she proudly wore the snow symbol on her headband which was wrapped around her forehead. Why? You look. I know right. Anko interrupted her friend with a eating grin before twirling around playfully, getting several more men to feel their pants get tighter when her trench coat flew high enough to give a view of the section of her suit that hugged her ass perfectly. Always funny to see a guys walk into a frozen pole when they try to sneak a dirty peek at me when I'm out on patrol. She finished. Damn, could bounce a quarter off that thing. Many of the onlooking men thought, not even registering the ironic statement Anko just said pertaining to the situation. Well, with what you're wearing, are you that surprised? Nope, but it keeps me warm, and is flexible enough to fight in, so not my problem if guys can't think with their bigger heads more often. I'm not easy, you know. She huffed in mock anger. Hannah. Chum called out, hoping that with who the first two people were her daughter was also with them, while interrupting the two friends, who didn't seem to mind at seeing hopeful expression written on the Inuzuka head's face. The shinobi directly to Naruto's right began to move their hand towards their Inu mask, before taking it off, revealing the young face of one Inuzuka Hannah. Hi Ka-san. She answered with a warm smile and happy voice at seeing her mother once more, before said mother appeared in front of her, embracing her in a bone-crushing hug. My little Hannah-chan is back. Chum whispered happily in an uncharacteristically sentimental moment, though being understandable considering the circumstances. My, just look at you. She cooed after letting her daughter go and now sizing up the slightly older-looking female. Hannah hadn't really changed much in the 3 years since she left Konoha, other than growing more beautiful, in Naruto's opinion of course, as well as her hair growing slightly longer, now reaching her mid-back in her usual ponytail. Her clothes hadn't changed drastically either. Her green Chunin jacket she once wore was now replaced with her opened white Junin vest, and the rest of her attire was the standard Junin outfit in black. She also had a pair of kodaki strapped across her lower back, with each hilt facing the opposite direction. To finish off her look, she had her snow headband DRD across her forehead, which also kept her bangs from falling into her eyes, but leaving a few strands to hang over the headband. Despite her minimal physical changes, Chum could easily tell just by how Hannah currently held herself that she was much stronger now than she was 3 years ago, thanks to her mate more likely than not. It's good to see you too, Ka-san. Hannah retorted with a smile. How is the squirt? She chuckled. He is as brash as ever, but he is a good boy and a lot stronger too, even made Chunin. She answered with obvious pride. Always knew he would, wouldn't be surprised if he makes Junin soon. Not to interrupt, but we do have a war to fight. Naruto, who are your other two companions, though I can manage a guess. Jiraiya interrupted urgently, making everyone remember they were literally in the middle of a battlefield. The shinobi on the far right removed the Neko mask to reveal the emerald feline eyes of ex-Kumo Kunoiki and container of the Nibi no Nekomata ni Yugito. Yugito, having liked her wardrobe in Kumo, opted to keep the same clothing style as before, though modifying it slightly. The once lavender armor she wore over her midsection was now the same pure white as her comrades' flak jackets. Also, she exchanged the separate Junin pants and shirt for a custom-made bodysuit much like Anko's, only it had short sleeves and ended down at her shins, as well as not being as tight against her body, though still showing off her curvaceous figure slightly. Her only physical change was her hair, which grew even longer and now, instead of ending at her lower back, ended at the bottom of her butt, with the bangs lining her face and forehead slightly more wild. Truth be told, many of her shinobi peers that she mingled with in Snow Country repeatedly suggested for her to get a haircut. However, when she showed them a fighting style that Naruto taught her that dealt with using her hair as a viable weapon, they dropped the subject, especially convinced when moments later the large tree she attacked with her ponytail fell to the earth in several pieces. The final change was the snow headband she wore on her forehead, which kept said wild bangs from draping over her line of vision. The final shinobi to reveal themselves was the one directly to Naruto's left, who removed the kitsune mask with 3 crimson whisker marks on each cheek to reveal the fiery red eyes of one Kyuubi no Kitsune, aka Natsumi. Natsumi being the immortal demon that she was, hadn't physically changed from her beautiful self one bit in the 3 years that passed. However, her wardrobe had, if only slightly. In fact, the only changes to what she wore now and back during the invasion was that the color or her flak jacket going from the maroon to white, and her headband now adorning the snow insignia. After revealing her identity, she felt it was finally time to withdraw her henge, and allowed her 4 crimson tails and fox ears to come to life. All the army aside those from Suna standing behind the generals tensed after the newcomers revealed themselves. Many of them reverting back to their old selves and sneered at the intrusion of the demons in their fight, despite not 5 minutes ago being saved by one of those very demons. However, there was also another thought amongst a majority of them. Fing bastard took all the hot chicks. The men thought, seeing all of the beautiful and sea women Naruto had brought with him. With most of them willing to give up an arm or a leg just for a date with one of the beauties, and probably their souls if things ended with them getting into bed with one demon or not. So you've all returned. Tsunade spoke up, silencing everyone else. Not that we aren't appreciative of the help. But exactly why are you here? Last I checked, Snow wished to stay out of this war. She questioned. We are here because an old monkey called in a favor, while the Shodaime Yukikage gave me their blessing to come. Naruto answered, knowing many would get the monkey reference he spoke of. I see, that I'll have to thank that old monkey for the assistance before I throttle it for keeping secrets from us. She answered with her own smile. He is a citizen of Snow Country now and must abide by the rules the daimyo and Yukikage have set down. It would be treasonous to have given out vital information about Snow Country or its people to another village. Surely you as Hokage understand his position. And if it makes you feel better about him, he had a meeting with the leaders of Snow making a deal that if Snow doesn't ask for information about Konoha, then he won't give you any information about Snow. He shot back with a shrug. I see. Tsunade said almost to herself, a look of thoughtfulness on her face. Well, it's good to have you back, Naruto. I'll have to thank Kyuubi and the Yukikage personally later for sending you 5. Jiraiya spoke up with a semblance of happiness and relief in his voice once more. Don't thank them yet, Jiraiya. They gave me permission, but I chose the team that would accompany me, and I didn't pick them for Konoha's sake. I did it for them because they each have their own reasons for wanting to be involved in this particular battle. Naruto answered, before giving the aged Sannin a look that would scare the Shinigami himself. And I suggest you stay away from Kyuubi, because remember what happened the last time you were in Yuki for your movie. He stated, letting the details be rerun in the pervert's mind, who paled greatly. Hearing this, a large vein bulged on Tsunade's forehead. What did my perverted teammate do this time? She questioned while cracking her knuckles loudly. He was directing his Ika movie that Kyuubi was starring in, and went overboard in his duties when Hime-sama came out in her 2-piece bathing suit for the first love scene between her and the male lead in the pool. He tried to give her some personal pointers at what her character was supposed to do. If you get my drift. Anko answered with a eating grin at the memory, before seeing Tsunade stomp towards the cowering man. No need to beat him, Hokage-sama. Trust me, he got enough of a beating via Whiskers here since he volunteered to be Hime-sama's bodyguard during the filming. Plus she quit right after that, so the movie couldn't even be finished. She explained, which made Tsunade stop her rampage. That W was you. Jiraiya almost shouted at the sadistically smirking Naruto, his face pale as a ghost. Hi. But I was far kinder to you than what you deserved for trying to defile and deflower our Hime-sama in front of not only me but several other people. You should just be glad that I let you keep your balls after that. I was fully within my rights to take them, and more considering your actions against a daimyo as well as with me. He answered, making Jiraiya pale even more. Not to interrupt this reunion, but as Jiraiya-sama said, we are in the middle of a war, and have only about 45 minutes left before the battle starts. So perhaps we should begin planning with our new forces and what little time we have left. Shikamaru stated lazily after entering the area. He's right, with your help this battle should be much easier to win. Tsunade agreed. Very well, Naruto agreed before heading back towards the camp with everyone else in tow. 1 hour later, the two armies were once again standing on opposite ends of the battlefield, staring each other down. However, the generals were now at the back of their respective armies, preparing any last-minute adjustments to their strategies or position. You 4 know what to do, right? Naruto asked, with his snow comrades huddled around him, separated from the rest of the army. Of course, Whiskers, what do you take us for, fresh out of the academy, Genin? Anko shot back playfully, while spinning a kunai on a finger. That's not the point, Anko-chan. This isn't like a mission, it's war. And a war where our only trustworthy allies are few and far between. Naruto explained with a sigh. Hi, we know Whiskers, we'll watch our asses out there, we get it. She relented, though mentally smiling that despite all they have done together in snow, he was still concerned about their well-being in a non-sist way. And we should be saying that to you, cause if you hadn't noticed when you and Red revealed yourselves, many of the shinobi grew stupid again and will probably secretly gun for you within all the chaos. I know, but they aren't my concern. He answered flatly. We should just concentrate on what we need to, everything else is inconsequential right now. Yugito piped in. My only question is what Konoha might try to pull once we win. Natsumi mused, knowing that after their miraculous return Konoha would try to sink their teeth in him again. What else? Try to get you and Naru-kun as the ultimate guardians of Fire Country and Konoha, as well as us, more likely than not. Hana answered coldly, being reminded of Konoha's actions against the demon pair in the past. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Naruto answered. But until then just do what we came here to do. He ordered in a slightly cold tone, getting his companions to nod in agreement. We should head back, they are probably finished by now. Natsumi suggested. The 5 snow shinobi got up from their respective positions before Hana's voice spoke, resounding through the area. I hope you enjoyed our conversation, Jiraiya-san. She greeted. Said hermit, soon let his genjutsu drop and emerged off the bark of a nearby tree. I should have figured that you had gotten stronger, but to be able to see through my best stealth jutsu, I'm impressed. He complimented. What, you thought we wouldn't grow more powerful when we were living in the same village as one of the strongest shinobi in the elemental nations? Anko scoffed, obviously speaking about Naruto. Hardly, but not even Tsunade can detect this jutsu when I really don't want her to notice me. So it was simple shock on my part that you could sense it. He shot back. Not that this isn't a pleasant conversation, Jiraiya, but Naruto cut in emotionlessly, which made the aged man shiver slightly. We have more pressing matters to attend to than idle chit-chat. After all, we have to finish a war that you could not, he finished, before the group began to leave. Wait, the aged man urged, making the group stop. I was wondering how you used your Two-San's Kekkei Genkai without using his kunai. He inquired. The scene he was speaking about had been racking the aged Sannin's mind ever since he saw it. Simple. Naruto answered bluntly, before turning with a smirk. Quote. Two-san was a genius when it came to his jutsus. The way he created them left almost a limitless number of variations to be created by those he taught him to. And our Kekkei Genkai jutsu is no different. I just happen to have created a single variation while currently working on another. He answered before turning back. The Sannin's brow knitted slightly at hearing that Naruto was creating more, obviously more powerful versions of an already almost unstoppable jutsu. I see. Answer me this then. Why did you stop your surprise attack when Orochimaru and the other cages were probably at their most vulnerable? Please don't insult our intelligence, Jiraiya, and if you're asking that question seriously, then you must be losing your edge along with your age. Natsumi spoke with a cold, mocking tone. The 5 snow shinobi abruptly left after Natsumi's words, leaving a frowning Jiraiya for 3 reasons. The first one being what the group spoke about before Hana called him out. They had their own plans in this war and were keeping it a secret from Konoha, Suna, and Whirlpool. There would be no trust between the two groups, which could pose a large problem later on, either during or after the war, depending on what their plans were. The second reason is because Hana had actually hit the nail on the head as to one of the viable options Tsunade and many of the Shinobi Council members were considering after not only finally finding Naruto again, or rather him finding him, but seeing the new strength he possessed proven by that barrier he erected. Once this war was over, Konoha would try once again to get Naruto and his group back. And they didn't give a damn if they were now snow shinobi or not. He was the son of their country's greatest hero. He belonged there and to Konoha. Lastly, it was for Naruto's feelings on how Konoha treated him, always as a being of power they wanted under control, never the human being he was, and how Naruto still reacted. In truth, Jiraiya had hoped these 3 years may have subdued Naruto's ill will towards Tsunade, the Uzumaki clan, Konoha, and himself. However, the years seemed to have done nothing to alleviate the rightful bitterness he held for those who have greatly wronged him. And in truth, Jiraiya was being selfish in that sense of wanting that alleviation so he could finally spend some time with the godson he had neglected for over a decade, if he could even rightfully call Naruto that any longer. Shaking his head to knock those thoughts away, he steeled his emotions knowing now wasn't the time to be brooding over foolish mistakes, and shinshined away to give his reconnaissance report of Naruto's actions to Tsunade. The entire area soon grew deathly quiet, as if the calm before a horrific storm was drowning the area. The shinobi armies straightened out their ranks, becoming poised and ready to begin the battle that would end this war, for whom only the fates can decide. Then, almost as if Kami itself wished to personally begin the battle, flying above in the channel between the armies flew a single white dove. Before it cooed loudly for all to hear, an almost supernatural battle trumpet to begin the battle. I.G.O. Both Tsunade and Orochimaru ordered the two armies whom rushed towards each other screaming their war cries. And just like that, the fourth great shinobi war had begun. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.